be on soon.
Okay, now we're gonna deal with a very important subject today. Kind of a real understanding of what Kierkegaard meant when he said, truth is never away from the situation of the knower, right? So what can happen is we're always facing a concrete particular situation. Would that be true?
Yeah.
But who's noticed that people can get really theoretical when it comes to spiritual things? Have concepts and ideas. Do you see what I mean? So we're going to look at that in a really practical way. But our starting point is that, first of all, we have when we approach spiritual life or people or our own lives, we engage in often what we would call, if I was to put it clearly, horizontal cause and effect thinking. Now, what I mean by that is, do you notice that when you look at material life, it's matter and energy, which is our material body, is that right? Matter and energy, persisting through time in space. Would that be true? So it's moving that away. It's horizontal, right? Now, how many people here have ever had the experience that their spouse is pissing them off? And literally believed that that was true. Literally believed. When caught in this way of thinking, we cannot help but think this way. Psychologists, for example, will always think in terms of cause and effect. The reason that a person is upset is because of childhood experiences. Cause, what's the cause?
Childhood experiences.
And what's the effect? Upset bead. Okay? Or they say, well, it's thinking that's causing it, which again is an object away from myself. What's the cause? Thinking. And what's the effect? Upset bead. You see what I mean? Sylvia says or does something I don't like, and I get upset. So it's horizontal, isn't it? This happens, therefore this happens. Do you see what I mean? So we notice, for example, whether we like it or not, like we're now, I'm 68, you're 70, Steve. You know, another 12 years, I'm going to be 80. Basically, the chances are I could be dead. Life is very, very temporary. I'm going to have to face old age, sickness, and death to some degree, whether I like it or not. Again, I'm facing that object away from me, and I get upset, or maybe afraid, or whatever. But do you see how this cause and effect thinking is in operation all of the time? Would you all agree with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when we're enclosed in this cause and effect thinking, we are not, there is no wisdom. This is the seeing of natural man as separate and apart from God. You with me? Cause and effect thinking is good for functional life. Okay, if I need to do this, I've got to do, but I'm not talking about that. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about that when it comes to our upsets and all of this sort of stuff, what happens is we find our mind isn't very clear and we find our heart disturbed. Who's ever experienced their mind not being very clear and their heart disturbed? Who experiences that? Would you say that's ubiquitous? That's the human experience. So what happens is, how many people have you ever tried to become aware, like tried to become aware?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Again,
Yeah.
Again, there's the cause. If I do this action, I'm going to get this result. In other words, awareness is going to be the result of a finite action. Hello? Right? But I can think that way, can't I? Okay, one day I'm going to get to God. Well, straight away, to get to God means that it's going to be a time process, which is change. and then I'm finally going to get God. Are we clear? So this way of thinking is constant and habitual. Now, it's right and proper to its order. Would you agree with that? It's right, it's proper and functional living. But when it comes to our upsets and all of this sort of stuff, how many people here have been caught in blame, in the sense that that is causing and I'm the effect? Do you see what I mean? What about someone says something nice and then I feel happy? They're cause and I'm effect. The belief that the world can give you happiness or take it away is absolutely natural and inevitable in terms of being natural man, separate and apart from God. Are we all clear on that? Okay, that's a term in our Western scriptures, natural man. Okay, you can't see spiritual things. Now, so we have horizontal thinking, which is cause and effect. Are we clear on this? Is this helping, by the way? Is this making things clearer? Oh, good. Okay. I've just been thinking about it this week. Now, there's also a vertical cause. Now, a vertical cause is very interesting. It never occurs doesn't arise from within space, or it's not caused by time. You with me? It's not caused. It has no cause. Now, our normal states of being are cause and effect. They're the result of cause and effect. Would you all agree with that? Our normal states of being. I'm feeling good, I'm feeling bad, I'm up and down and around, right? But when we find ourselves, for example, when we're contemplating the presence of God, for example, what happens is we find ourselves, our minds being clear and our hearts being non-disturbed. This is a way of being that arises. It's a new life that is born from above, isn't it? Or from within. You say it, people in various traditions have said it differently, but can you see that when you're being in a way of being, it's vertical, it's spiritual understanding. Wisdom is not cause and effect. When what arises in me is a way of seeing, where I'm appreciating the fact that everything here is the presence of God, that very being is God giving us a new life as our being. You with me? As our being. So the thing is that I'm thinking. Oh yeah. Okay, got it. Okay. So what we're looking at is, you see, and when we're looking at God, we have to clearly have a thorough understanding of what God is, which was given to us by Swami Dayananda. If I was to say that the most magnificent thing about Swami Dayananda was the fact that he had a vision of God that even a Christian Judaic person like me, who's not a Hindu, could come to understand. So he gave a universal understanding of God. You with me? Now, the first thing is this. Can I describe God with my senses? Can I see God with my senses? Can I see God with my senses? No.
I think so.
Okay. Can I think of him as an object that I can think about? Can I do that? No. So I can't. So here we're looking at something. We can't be aware of him as an object away from ourselves. We can't describe him, and we can't see him with our senses. Okay.
Well, We can think of him as an object. It's just that it's not.
No, but the object we're thinking about is not God.
Okay.
Okay. If I think about God, am I knowing God? Absolutely not. I'm having a thought about God. You with me so far? That means, when Dayananda says, you've seeked here and you've seeked here and you've seeked here and you've looked here and looked here, eventually you have to arrive back at yourself. You remember that? You've got to arrive back at yourself. All that you got left is yourself. Now, let's just see what that means. Now, what happens is, you know how he talks about, you've got the strivings for security and then the strivings for pleasure, but then you have the strivings for dharma, don't you? Right? Now, this gets really interesting because he also says that God is present in us as dharma, doesn't he? Present in us as dharma. Now, let's just have a look at this. So we can't know God as an object away from ourselves, but we can know God as a new life obtaining in us. Okay, we can know. So the thing is that we can only know God as our very life. Right? Now, let's just have a look at how that practically works with Dharma. Who here has ever suddenly had the idea that they're acting in a wrong way? Suddenly they're seeing clearly that they are being a bit of a jerk. Right? Now, that seeing doesn't come from cause and effect. That is the intelligence of God obtaining in you as a clear perception of what is right and wrong. Does that make sense? So the presence of God comes alive in us as a movement within us and as us. Are we clear here? So the presence of God always endows us with a new life. In this case, I see that, I'm acting wrongly. Right? I also see that of what would be right to do, and because I see doing right as something good, I have a will towards acting that way. Have you noticed that? So the presence of God becomes active in me as Dharma, right? And it's from above, it's vertical. It's not caused because of what Mummy did to me when I was 6. You see what I mean? It's not caused because I'm doing something. It's given, isn't it? So this perception that I suddenly realize that I'm being a bit of an idiot, that's not coming. That's the light of awareness showing me I'm an idiot. And because God is good, and all good comes from God, we can see that, can't we? So doing right, we have an intrinsic in our heart. We have a desire to act rightly. This is the striving of Dharma, isn't it? And because of that, a whole range of things open up. So what happens is, do you see what I'm talking about here? It's not like something outside acting on me, right? Because that's cause and effect, isn't it? It's not cause and effect with God. God obtains in us as our very life. Are we clear so far on that? To some measure, when it comes to Dharma, right? Now, what about wisdom? So we're looking at conduct. So we're looking at the good of God in terms of right conduct, right? Now, it's only when we live that good. Does that make sense? So right conduct is good. Would you say right conduct is good? So the whole spiritual game is living the goodness, isn't it? Now, if I am not living the goodness, do I know goodness? If I am not living the very goodness, do I know goodness? It's not possible, is it?
Ask the question again.
Okay. It's only when I am living the goodness do I know goodness. You know, when Dayananda says we discover love in loving.
Okay.
Right? See, what happens is...
Hey, Steve wants to ask a question. Bede. Yeah. Steve wants to ask a question.
Yeah.
I asked to be more clear about that last.
Okay. I'll be a bit clearer. It's a bit tricky, this, but you'll get it when I've been thinking about how to say it all week. Okay. I hope it's working. Okay. Now. Okay. When you've got water can go from being cold to being hot. Is that true? So something is being hot or something is being cold, right? Now, if I look at a spiritual virtue like patience and I discuss it as an object away from a subject, right, as in the abstract, right? For example, patience. Patience is a spiritual virtue, isn't it? But I can only know patience when I'm being patient. I can think about it as abstracted from my experience, as from my life, can't I? Patience. I can think of goodness and truth and all of these highfalutin theological ideas about God and spirituality and consciousness. Have you seen people talking and discussing about it? It's all abstract. It's drawn away. But patience never exists by itself, cut off from a human life, is it? So we only appreciate patience when we're being patient. Do you see what I mean? Or we only appreciate awareness when we're being aware. You see, then it's got juice, hasn't it? Like peace. Oh, I want peace. I mean, what do you mean I want peace, right? Basically, when I am being peaceful, I know what peace is. Is peace my thoughts about peace?
No.
So I can have a thought about the peace of God. Is that right, Steve? I can have a thought about the peace of God.
Yeah, you have a thought. Yes.
Whoop-de-dee-doo-dee-dum. It's good. Now, but when I am being peaceful, then I'm knowing what peace, being peace, I know what peace is. Does that make sense? Knowledge is never away from what we're being. True wisdom is as we see, we be. Are we clear on that so far? So, for example, we receive the knowledge from Swami Dayananda that the problem is centered on us. Oh, okay, the problem is centered on us. Now, if I come to a spiritual understanding of that fact, and then I'm suddenly upset with Sylvia, and then suddenly the wisdom comes in and goes, you know, hold it, you're losing yourself again. Do you see how that wisdom is not external? It's obtaining in me as a way of seeing. Can you see that? It's obtaining in me as a way of seeing. It's God's life being lived as my life. It's non-dual. This is fundamental to Vedanta, isn't it? It's not like there's the two of us. Do you see what I mean? Non-dual knowledge is something we're being. Otherwise, it doesn't make sense. If it's not something we're being, it's something away from us. And if it's away from us, it's an object. And if it's an object, it's not true.
Mm.
You know when Swami Dayananda says that what we're seeking is already here. What we're seeking is already here. Right? Now that's a wisdom. Now, that can be a theology or a philosophy. Oh, yes, consciousness is already here. It's ever present. Well, whoop-de-dee-doo-dee-dum. That's not going to do anything. But when I'm actually right here, right now, appreciating the presence of God, right, I am being that knowing, aren't I? Now, Dayananda said a very interesting thing. You see, when you look at God, you look at Ishvara. You look at Ishvara, right? the thing we can say about Ishvara is goodness intelligently expressed. Would that be true? Goodness intelligently expressed. So God expresses himself in the form of the universe with a beautiful, intelligent order, and it's highly beneficial for things, right? Now, that's what he called the macrocosmic being, didn't he? And he says that we're the microcosmic being. So when we're goodness intelligently expressed, can you see how we are one with God only then? Okay? That's the only, then the microcosm is the macrocosm. Or in our Western tradition, then I'm being a likeness to the image I am. Okay? And it is said that only our salvation, our freedom, depends upon being goodness intelligently expressed. We know this. Have you noticed that when you do the right thing, there's an inward satisfaction? Have you noticed? Who's noticed that? Okay? Because we're in order. We're in order. We're lined up. You see what I mean? Like, so when we so-called look for this freedom, when I'm actually having a clear mind and an undisturbed heart, that is a way of being. Is that true? This is knowing God. Anything else is an abstraction. Anything else. So living the good is the spiritual life. Would you agree with that? Living the good. If I'm upset with Sylvia and talking unkindly, am I living the good?
Mm-mm.
No. So God is absent for me right there and then. Would that be true? But I'm being unkind and I'm dramatizing unkindness. But when I am living the good, even if I don't feel like it, it's not wholehearted. But Dharma starts at the more external aspects of the person, doesn't it? Conduct. So, and the fact is that built into our heart is a knowledge of right and wrong. And when we live that rightness, when we live Dharma, which is living the good of God, isn't it? Intelligently, isn't it? In terms of conduct, can you see how that's spiritual? It has an effect. The only thing that transforms us is when we live the good. So in terms of conduct, how do we live the good? Tell me, how do we live the good in terms of conduct?
Body by
being
body.
good.
We avoid the wrong and we do the right. Right? That's the only way. Now, that's to do with conduct. Next we come to cognition. Okay, now like what I said before, what are we normally caught up in? Horizontal thinking, aren't we?
Could I, Bede?
Yep.
One thing, just before you go to the next thing that you're going to talk about, it occurred to me when you were talking about being the good, I was thinking of a lot of Christian people that think that seems to be the teaching is to be good and be virtuous. So you do find, Christian people who are good Christians, if you will. But so they're living the good by being kind, not hurting others, etc. But I know that what you're talking about is different than that. Has to be.
Yes, because there's two things.
There's more to it than that.
There are some Christians who live because they when I told you about that fat boy that I was arguing with, and I was cruel to him, right? And he says, "You're just fat." I was about 13, and then suddenly he says, "I don't know why I am. I've tried and everything," and suddenly I just felt a remorse at being unkind. That kindness, the fact was that because I have a striving for kindness and an appreciation from kindness, kindness is a quality from God, right? Spiritual kindness. So what happened is then I could see that I was doing wrong, couldn't I? So it was an inner striving, Dharma. But at other times, because I was brought up Catholic, I shouldn't do that, that's wrong, I'm going to be punished for it. Do you know what I mean? Like, that's external. So if I've got a gun pointed at me and says, now you better be loving, otherwise you're going to burn in hellfire, that's not freedom.
No.
That is not, the good is then not the context for my spiritual understanding. Some Christians open this up, open their heart to God, I'm absolutely sure, and that happens often. Does that make sense? I'm sort of more Christian than Hindu, actually. But the fact of the matter is that it has to be an inner thing if it's of God. Does that make sense? Right? So it's this inner striving for right and wrong, right? So when we're looking at, so when I live the good of God in terms of right conduct, it's only when I'm doing that am I being spiritual. Does that make that is the only thing that transforms me. Because Western thinking has been absorbed in abstractions from reality. Can you see that? They talk about virtue and they talk about this and they talk about that and, you know, goodness and peace and, you know, ad nauseum. But like what Kierkegaard said, we must encounter the good of God in the concrete particular. So here I am, I'm upset with Sylvia. Is that a concrete particular? Yep. And then suddenly the wisdom comes in and saying, you know, you're not doing right here. This is wrong, right? That comes from above, doesn't it? It doesn't come from my psychology that's happened in the past. It's a vertical movement. It's the movement of God in me as my life. It's a vertical movement, and it transforms me, doesn't it? Because I suddenly have a perception of the good. I have a perception that I'm being a bit of a jerk, and then I conform my actions to Dharma, don't I? Is that clear? Or am I making sense here? It's a hard subject to talk about. But yeah, Bob? Can't hear you, Bob. You're on mute. Even I can't hear you. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. No, I just want to say it does make sense, and it's a very useful.
I can't hear you, Bob. I can't hear you. You've got to speak into the mic. You've turned yourself on mute again, Bob. I'll wring his neck. I'll wring his neck. I can't stand it when
Bede.
Yep.
Go back to God, please. Go back to being in God, Bede.
Okay, go, Bob.
So it does make sense, and it's very useful. It's been very useful to hear this description of vertical versus horizontal.
Yeah.
And because vertical has a sense of not being in a way it's not in space and time. And it's, you know, and it's not in, right. So it's not in time. And so it makes a very good sense.
Yeah. It's immediate, it's not mediated. Right? Now, so then we come to, so when we're talking about the transformation of ourselves as an individual, which is a very important subject, a very interesting subject to me. It's been a subject that's interested me all my life because I was so stuffed up. Okay, I experienced myself that way. Now, you then come to, you've got conduct, which is, it's more external to people, but what's determining my conduct is Dharma, not what people are saying or doing around me. This is why Dharma is such a freeing thing. You with me? Because it's not, your actions, how you're acting is not caused by what's happening. It's a response from within to what is happening. Are we clear on that? Right? Without this, there's no freedom. Do you see that? There's no freedom. If I am acting because in stimulus response, which is Pavlov thing, it's true. Human beings mainly work by stimulus response, cause and effect. Okay? Now we come to cognition. So we're dealing with, we need to work on Dharma, and let's continue. It's not like, I'm too advanced for Dharma. It's ridiculous. Okay. So Dharma. Next we come to cognition, how I see things. So what happens is I'm seeing I'm always perceiving the world, myself, and other people. Would that be true? Okay. Now, when it comes to the world and when it comes to cognition, we have ontological assumptions, reality assumptions about people, about ourselves, and about the world. The world sucks. The world's wonderful. I'm no good, or I'm terrific, or they're great, or all of these are not right. They're not true. Right? They're statements because they're fixed ideas. Do you see what I mean? The world is neither good nor bad, actually. Dayananda never used the word good or bad for the world. He said there's right and wrong, right? But so the thing is that who here has ever been enclosed in the falsity of thinking that someone else is causing them pain or something else is causing them pain? Who's ever had that experience? Right? Now, this is where we pursue the good through wisdom. Now, again, remember I said we can only be transformed when we live the good. So when we live the good in terms of wisdom, we are actually seeing the situation through the eyes of intelligence that comes from above, that obtains in us. Are you with me? So, for example, when Dayananda says, think of the words of the teacher, bring them to mind, and then when you seek to see the meaning of the words without thinking, that's vision, isn't it? That's vision, right? It's not thinking in the sense of our usual way of thinking. And so when let's say, for example, I feel I'm a bit dispirited and a bit yuck, right? Now, but because we have the spiritual understanding, the presence of God is always here, I avert to that attention, to those words, to that meaning, and I go quiet, and then I seek to see that meaning. And then suddenly what happens? Click, I'm lifted out of myself, my way of seeing. You see, the great thing about Dayananda was this. You would be sitting listening to him, and then the thoughts that you've had for years in terms of ways of thinking become neutralized by the wisdom that obtained in you. Does that make sense? Like you'd be sitting there listening to him, you're listening, and then suddenly you're seeing as he is seeing. And in that very seeing, which is living the good in terms of wisdom, agreed? Okay? That's the only thing that changes us. He said you need wisdom, but you need to live the wisdom. You need to live the wisdom, don't you? Well, can we see this? He says it. So we do need the wisdom. So we have the wisdom. God is ever present and omnipresent, right? That's the wisdom. But unless I am living it, it means nothing. It means nothing. All right? Now, so you can see that we have to live the truth. So when we find ourselves seeing people as AHs or bitches or whatever it is that we see people as, you know I'm talking about. Whoever takes a view of another human being that's rather derogatory. Who's ever done that? Okay? And it's very easy to go, well, that's okay, Well, it's not. Well, if in the context of learning to live God's life as our life, it's very important to notice when you're doing that. Does that make sense? Not as a thing, as a should, but because you love the good. The greatest motivation is love of the good. Can you see that? When Dharma is active in me, as a fact, I am emotionally concerned about the welfare of others. Have you noticed that? In our Christian tradition, that's called love of neighbor, isn't it? But how many? And when we're imbued with love of our neighbor, we'll notice that we act properly. Would you say that's true? But we do it out of love, not because I better do it, otherwise I'm going to fry it when I die. That's not helpful, right? That's not helpful. So So the thing is that, but we can, as we know, that concern about the welfare of others, who's ever experienced this week where that's died in them and something else comes about? How about you, Steve? Have you ever noticed that?
No, not other people, only myself. I think have
you been upset with anyone this week?
I can honestly say I have not, only myself.
Oh, okay, but do you see what I mean? But it can happen. You know what I mean? Like what happens is it's easy for us to lose that. You see, when that welfare of others is active in us, it opens up our cognition about what we need to do and doing the needful, doesn't it?
But can I just say something? Whether you're upset with others or with yourself, the love of God still disappears.
We're going to go into that. We're going to go into that. But what I'm saying
it doesn't have to be with.
What I'm saying is
with it. It doesn't have to be with somebody else. You can just be with yourself.
True. I'll go into that in a minute. But when we're involved in, and when there's the active welfare towards the welfare of others is active in us, it makes us alert and very responsive. So sometimes it might not be we're not angry with other people, but we're not really alert and responsive. We're not really sharp in terms of doing the needful. You with me? Because when our heart is involved, when Dharma is present in us as a concern for the welfare of others, what happens is our whole mind. I know that I can get dull on this. Does that make sense? Right? With Sylvia, for example, I can get negligent. It's not that I'm doing anything wrong, but I'm not really being responsive. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see what I mean? So Dharma is something we live. And Dayananda said we have to learn to live a life of Dharma, don't we? Right? Now, when it comes to cognition, when we're seeing through the eyes of wisdom, we're seeing what is. We're seeing the truth. Does that make sense? The truth liberates us from our view of things. Do you see what I mean? From our view of things. That person's caused me upset. I hate them, right? That's a way of seeing. Is that true? Because human beings have a lot of hatred in them. They have the possibility of hatred. Now get this. This is an Aristotelian idea, but it's an important one. We are not only what is, reality. The reality of ourselves is what is and what can be. Right? So what can be, the divine possibility of a human being is that I can be the goodness that comes from God, intelligently expressed. Is that what can be?
Mm-hmm.
But do you think that's always what is? No. Okay, but it always exists as a possibility. So do you see how we go from conduct and Dharma, and then we're going more interior to knowledge, aren't we? Wisdom. And wisdom clears up our minds, right? But not only do we want to have a way of being where our minds are clear, where our conduct is harmonious, so harmonious living is what Dharma delivers us. And Dayananda thinks it's absolutely important for preparation of spiritual life, because if you're not living harmoniously, you'll be disturbed. We then clean up our misconceptions. Like when we meet here and we talk and discuss this, we get more clarity. Have you noticed that? We're able to see things clearer. And lastly, so yeah, Amy?
No, I just wanted to say, last time we spoke, you talked a lot about this. Am I living in my world or am I living in God's world?
Yes.
And that came up many times afterwards. And of course, when that comes to your mind, then you're in the present moment. In order to be in God's world, you have to be in the present moment, and the given is there, as you spoke about so many times.
Yeah.
But that was very helpful. I just wanted to say, and it relates to
the discrimination between. You see, the most important thing is this wonderful thing of discrimination. So when we have a when we're seeing what's wrong and we're seeing what's right, we can then make a choice. Is that true?
Yes.
When we can see what we're false and what's true, we can then move away from the false towards the true, which is a movement towards God. When we see what's wrong and we know what's right, we can move towards God by turning away from the wrong towards the right. Can you see that?
Yes.
And that movement towards the right or towards the true is living the good that is God, isn't it? It's always live. If we do not live the good that is God, we're stuffed. All right? Then we have the wonderful discrimination in terms of being. We're either being our self-life, our world, or we're being the life that God is constantly giving us. Again, do you see what I mean? Again,
isn't it like being one with God or being one with ourselves?
No, it's either being enclosed in our self-life or living in God.
Well, you can say you're being one with yourself.
Yeah, well, yeah,
okay.
but it's more like you're stuck in it. It's like it's not liberation. There's an absence of goodness and absence of truth. And right and wrong don't apply. That whole, when you're caught up in yourself, you're not being good, intelligently expressed, are you? You're not being obviously a microcosm of God.
Yeah.
All right. Now.
But whether you're but whether you're involving yourself with yourself or involving yourself with others is still the same.
Yes.
You're still being involved with something that is not God.
Yes. If you're upset with people and all of this sort of stuff, this is your will. When you're caught in subjectivity, the world.
Or even sorry, I keep stressing this point because sometimes it happens to me as well. Being involved with yourself, like I go, oh my God, I'm never gonna get it. You know, I keep falling into the same trap again, whatever. And this is just you with you, but you're still being involved with that. And God, there's no space for God then. You can be upset with another person or a situation or something like that.
That's the manifestation of the fundamental problem, which is we love ourselves, we seek self-preservation, and we love things in the world that we think are going to give us happiness and security. So that love of the world glues us to the world. So we're not interested in anything else. When our heart is dominated by a love of ourself and love of the world, we're in severe trouble, which is normal. That's what we're born into, seems to be. All right? But when we're lifted out of that, we can't by cause and effect actions, I'm going to do something about myself. That's not going to happen.
No, of course.
It's not going to happen. The only way we're lifted out is through this vertical thing from above. All right? Now, so here comes Swami Dayananda. You see, I want to go over. So what happens is the culmination, of course, in one sense, is living the life that God is continually giving us. Now, you know what Dayananda says? The only way you can invite Ishvara into your life is by being aware of him. Notice how being aware of him is seeing him. Does that make sense? It is not a doing. It is not a doing, right? So what happens is when you sit quietly and what you're doing is you're not going to, he said, you don't try and meditate like think of your toe or, that's not meditation. He said.
Think of your what, sorry?
Don't think of your nose, put your attention on your nose or whatever, right? What he said is.
Oh, your breath.
Yeah, or whatever. He was saying, bring your mind to yourself and think of no other thing. Now, this is the reason. The life and being that you are is the life and being that is God. That's fundamental Vedanta 101. Is that right? Fundamental. So I can at any moment, the recognition and the he even said, you make an appointment with yourself. An appointment with God is an appointment with yourself. You ever heard him say that? Beautiful way of saying it, right? So what happens is, he says, when you bring your mind to yourself and think of no other thing, that was the instruction that the Lord Krishna gave Arjuna, right? So what happens is, we want to be free of all horizontal movements when we're contemplating with nididhyasanam. With nididhyasanam, there is no horizontal cause and effect thing. I'm now going to relax. If you're unrelaxed, stay with that. Does that make sense? Right? Because through Swami Dayananda's understanding is that not only is God not away from any object, away from us, God pervades everything. God is the substance of everything. Everything takes its being from God. So what this means is, it's very important to engage in nididhyasanam, which is simply you're abiding in the appreciation of the presence of reality. But notice, that presence of reality is not away from the very presence of life that you are. Does that make sense? That when that presence of reality comes into your life, it obtains as a new life, not an improvement of the old. Right? And it manifests as a clear mind and a non-disturbed heart. This is the whole point. And we're only loving God when we're living the good that God is. Are we clear here? You know how they talk about love of God? We need to love being. We need to love abiding in being, abiding in God. In our Western scriptures, we have a saying, God is love. Those who are abiding in love are abiding in God, and God is abiding in them. Have you heard of that? Okay, St. John, beautiful saying. And another one that I like is man does not live by bread alone, which is material existence, but by every word that proceedeth from the mouth of God. When the life of God, when God communicates his life to us, which is the word of God, when he communicates his life to us, we change, don't we? Are we clear here? So what we're going to do is we're going to do nididhyasanam. The very life and being you are is not an abstraction. It is here already. This is fundamental Vedanta, isn't it? What you're seeking is here already. So what we're going to do is we're going to just bring our mind to ourselves. What does that mean? Bring our mind to the very sense of our life and being, which is here. Because it's there, I'm seeing it. And we're going to just simply abide in the appreciation of that. All right? And we're going to do that for a couple of minutes, okay? Are you ready? Okay, just come back to yourself. We're not trying to do anything. We're just seeking to appreciate the presence of God. The presence of God is away from no sound. The sound is the presence of God. The sensations are the presence of God. The humming of the fridge is the presence of God. We're inviting Ishvara into our life by being aware of him. We're not trying to be silent. If we're agitated, the presence of God is not away from that agitation. We encounter the presence of God in the very state we're in. We are living the good of God as our very life. This is the only way to know God, is by being. Our life is Sat. It's the very life that is here. Our real life is also light, light of awareness, Chit. And our life is the very fullness of life, the fullness, Ananda. Only when we are being ourselves are we being aware, and only when we are being ourselves and being aware are we being full. We don't have to go away from the concrete particular that we're in. As Kierkegaard said, truth is not away from the situation of the knower. The exact situation we're in. We're always in a situation. God is not away from that situation, whatever it is. Pleasant, unpleasant, painful, unpainful, comfortable, uncomfortable. We notice our mind is clear and our heart is undisturbed. We're simply being ourselves in the proper sense of that word. Okay. Open your eyes. Now, who got the sense of what Dayananda was talking about? An appointment with yourself is an appointment with the Lord. Because it's non-dual knowledge, isn't it? You only when you are living the life that God is, are you one with God. Does that make sense? That's the non-dualism. It's not like me and God. Okay? And he said it's very important to become familiar with ourselves as this. Right? It's very important. That's why nididhyasanam, or contemplation. But this depends upon a contemplative disposition. That means I have a heartfelt desire to abide in being, or to abide in God. I have to, that is love of God. Love of God is not some abstraction. I can't, my salvation isn't, okay, Jesus has died for my sins and everything's fine. That's just not true. Do you know what I mean? If you are not living the good, that is not true. Hindus can live the good, can't they? Muslims can live the good. Christians can live the good. Atheists can live the good. This is the universal teaching. But when we get theoretical and have theological debates and differences and all of this sort of stuff, it's horrible. It's not religious. You see what I mean? Converting people is not opening their eyes to the truth. Swami Dayananda called it violence, and it is. All right? Okay, Bobley. Did you get that? Did you get that understanding that you're just living an understanding as opposed to trying to do something? Did you get a feel for that?
Yeah.
Speak up, Bob.
Yeah. No, it was, I'm left speechless at the moment. But it was good. It was movements were noticed, but there was no problem with anything. So the heart was at rest.
Yes, the heart was at rest. So you appreciated yourself being clear in terms of your mind, aware, and also non-disturbance in your heart, right?
Right. I mean, right. No. So there's a difference between the mind. There's still movements, but there's no disturbance. Movements are not a disturbance.
Yeah. But that's Dayananda's thing. He thought this trying to quieten your mind was nuts.
Right.
Because you can be quiet in the face of the changes in the physical universe and the universe. The universe constantly moves because there's time and space here, isn't there? There's matter and energy persisting through time in space, which means change all the time. It's very interesting that the scholastics called material matter, their cosmology of St. Thomas Aquinas is that it's the study of change, where the word activity was referred to as God, activities from above. So this activity of being, right, is above material matter because it doesn't consist of change, but it's very active. It's not nothing, is it?
No, that's good. I don't think I've heard that before.
Yeah.
Yeah.
St. Thomas, he's pretty good.
Okay. Thank you.
Amanda.
Amy.
Can you put the screen in front of you like you had it with Bob had it so we can hear you, Amanda? Okay.
Amy.
That's okay.
Oh,
Amy.
Where do I get Amanda from? I don't know what.
Okay. Oh yeah, I think we got 2 letters. That's not there.
Okay.
There's a lightness when we practice this, when this happens. Mm-hmm. Almost like a physical light and a lightness in the heart and the mind.
Yeah. It's embodied. That's the whole point with you Christians. It's the life of God being embodied in the world, incarnation.
Yeah. Yes. And a fullness. There's a fullness there. You're living in God's world instead of the nonsense we live in.
Yeah. And you're living the life He is giving you. Does that make sense? Which is His life. Which is His life. Very good. Okay. Trisha.
Well, I enjoyed this talking about cause and effect as being horizontal and the given or the awareness being given, that it's not a cause and effect, it just is what is. It's given.
Yes.
And it's not that I did anything to get
it.
It just is present. And just for whatever it's worth, I've noticed lately that I'm sort of happy to go along with cause and effect until there's something that's really challenging. And that's when, something difficult, a situation that's difficult. And it's just so great to have these little ways of thinking that God is abidingly present. That's like, okay, I immediately become grounded in the situation in some way. I feel more solid. And the beautiful thing in that is that it's actually become more like, well, I just have to remember. And I guess the remembering is not my doing either. It's not that I did something. And so it's not that I did it. It's that I was somehow given the idea to remember. Given the idea.
There's an appetite.
It's just so great that we can move through life this way because of what we've been learning and listening to these talks and studying the Bhagavad Gita and things. That it's as if we have a choice. It appears that I have a choice.
We definitely have a choice. We don't want to. That choice. The difference is that the more we love God, in other words, the more we love being, because you notice that when you're being, like what Amy said, it's still here and it affects your body. Krishnamurti said a wonderful thing once. He said a lot of crazy things. But one good thing he did say. In the greater, the lesser is, but in the lesser, the greater isn't. So in the greater, it embraces God's intelligence and love and light embrace everything. And so when you're rooted in God, it embraces everything. And notice how, when Dayananda says you invite Ishvara into your life, we can only receive God, which is a vertical thing. We can only receive God. We don't receive him in the future, or we can only receive him into our life. And you notice how when you're just abiding, which is in the Christian tradition, abiding is, Dayananda used the word abiding sometimes too. When we're abiding in the reality of God, that's when we discover ourselves in the real sense of the word. We discover a new life because it's not produced by our past or the past conditioning. So there's no cause and effect here. It's there. Did you find when you were just simply abiding in the appreciation of the presence? So the more you love that, Trish, the more you will tend towards it. He called it a contemplative disposition. That's why dispassion is so important, because we have a passion for the world and a passion for ourselves. We get caught up in that. A new love has to be born in us, because then we will towards what we can't help but will towards what we see as good. The more we appreciate the goodness of God and the necessity of God in our life and the value of it, the more it'll take us up. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
And this is the transformation of heart that they talk about. It's a shift in the will. There's a new will born in us. In other words, we will what God wills. So our will and God's will become one and the same. We've normally got my will and God's will. Who's noticed that? Okay.
Yeah, the one thing that is in line with that, when you're talking about peace, and you can only know peace when you have peace.
When you're being peaceful, yes, yep.
When you're being peaceful, then you know it.
Yep.
And one thing that came to mind is having known peace from being peace.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm not in peace, it's that same sort of longing to, like, I'm more inclined to go toward whatever ways of thinking that, knowing that God is abidingly present. That's the one that's always works for me. It's the one for me. And then I do then become peaceful.
Now, isn't it interesting? Because you know what peace is, you have a cognition of disturbance that's different. It's not like, oh, I'm disturbed and I hate it. You're actually seeing, I have fallen away from peace. That's God calling you back, Tricia. He's always inviting you back. In St. John, that when they were describing John, you know what he said? He says, I'm always knocking at your door. I'm knocking at your door. I want to come in and I want to sup with you and have supper with you. That's the movement of God towards us. Do you mean? We just have to open our hearts to that, really. That's very good, Tricia.
Thank you.
What were you going to say? You going to say something?
Nothing, just thank you.
Okay. The sinner.
Well, that was all. That was a great conversation with Trish. And I understand having to know the value of God. That's something I think it takes a lot of contemplation to understand. Anyway, I'm trying to grapple with what you're saying and with the inquiry. And I'm almost like Bob. I'm kind of speechless. But that's okay.
Speechless as in speechless as in confused, or just?
No, not confusion, but just what to
good.
say. So you said like God is the substance of everything. So and Trish just said there's nowhere that God does not abide. Right? What's the saying? And then to know Ishwar, to know God, you have to be aware of Him. So this is in my mind, I'm going, well, how is it to be aware of Him? So then we talk about the thing of peace and not having peace. So we know peace is something we'd like. So we would like to go back to that and avoid the other. And there's so many other little things like that.
We can only be aware of Him. I'll just say something. We can only be aware of God as our life. Otherwise, it's an object away.
I understand that. I understand that, but my life is like, oh, I have to fix this, fix that. I don't like that.
That's your functional. That's your functional life. That's not your life. That's the functions that you have to perform in this material existence. That is not your life.
What if your functions take up all of your waking hours? Then there's no time for Ishwar.
No, because you can abide in God while you're doing the dishes. You can have a manner. You can have a clear mind and a non-disturbed heart while you perform action. So then you are living the life that God is giving you. That is your knowledge of God, and it's not away from when you're fixing something and the spanner breaks or anything else. He's never away.
No, I understand that. I was just kind of putting in arguing there from what you said, but no, I'm totally on board with all that. And I believe the thing is, I mean, to be aware of them every moment, you have to have
don't try every moment because
that. Let me finish.
Sorry.
You have to desire that more than you desire all the other things that you think would make you happy. You were taught, oh, I need this. Oh, I need a really good job. Oh, I have to have this house on the hill. You know, all these things are, a good wife, good family. You need to, I mean, those are all good things.
Yep.
And I believe you need to desire the awareness of God more than anything else in order for this to happen.
Okay. Vedanta says you need two qualifications. You need discrimination, so you need to know the difference between living God's life and your own life. That's discrimination. You need to know the difference between being, which is ever present, and what's changing. Mm-hmm. Agreed?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
That's discrimination, because then you got choice, as Tricia says, right? Right? So you either getting lost in a material life, or you can live in a spiritual life, but living in the spiritual life is living in the material world as it is. It's not denying. But the second thing they say is dispassion. We love ourselves and our own selves, and we love certain things to happen in order for us to feel happy and whatever. We have a passion for the world. That glues us to the world. So our problem is that we have a misdirected love. Our will is misdirected. That's why, you know the reason why I use the term the good of God? Because the good attracts our will. It creates a will towards it. So the more we contemplate the good of God, that's why, when Dayananda says that, do you during the day decide, okay, I'm going to make an appointment with myself, which is an appointment with the Lord, after I finish this job, even for 5 minutes. Do you ever do that?
I think about those things, but I don't actually do that. No.
Good idea to do it. Without nididhyasanam, we need to expose our mind to the teaching again and again in order to see clearly. We also need to appreciate God. We need to live His life more and more. Right? And again, the resistance is, of course, is that we're so self-absorbed and so in love with the world, as Sylvia was saying, that's our problem. That's why a shift in the heart is a shift in the will towards the good. Now that's evident in your life, Stephen. The thing is that what builds it, every time you consciously live the good, whether it's in terms of conduct, whether it's in terms of going towards living the truth or living the life, that's what changes you. And that's what's necessary. That isn't the practice. We're living the wisdom. It's not like a practice. We're living the wisdom. That is the only thing. Then we get taken up by something else. Does that mean we get given a new will born in us, don't we? A new inclination. All right?
Yeah, when I answered your question, I misunderstood you. I think about this all the time.
Oh, good.
I mean, it's not that it's frustrating. I love it, and it seems so evasive. Like, geez, I think. Anyway, it's even hard to put it in terms, in words. But I do think about my living God's life in my life all the time. It's just like,
good. And when it comes to you, live it, and you'll fall away, and then you recognize it, come back. It's wobble. Dayananda says wobble, like those Chinese dolls.
Yeah.
You know, you suddenly see yourself, and you wobble back. He says karma yoga is wobbling. There's no straight line here. We don't try and attempt to do it all the time. We're not looking at all the time. We're only interested, this moment I can live God. I can live the life that God has given me. This moment I can live the life that God. I'm not interested in how long. Because then you get time and you get striving, you get disappointment. There's no disappointment in I'm just going to become aware of the presence of God now. There's no disappointment in that, is there? Because the how doesn't belong to you. It belongs that you open up, you receive, life comes in. You see, God is ontologically always present, but in terms of our cognition, we're cut off from it. Does that make sense? It's our cognition. Yep. So the more receptivity we become,
it's all the mind.
The more receiving we are of him, the more he's in our life. So the more we can cognize and the clearer, the more he takes over our life. All right? So did you find today helpful?
Oh yeah. No, it just, to me, it just brings a lot of contemplation and, to try to understand. And it brings, whatever brings my mind back to stuff of Ishwar is Trump. No, that's the wrong word. I don't want to say trumps. It's far better than anything else.
Yeah, and the other thing too, Stephen, is because we're getting older, Nididhyasanam becomes more and more important. So contemplate the fact that your material existence is going to come to an end. It's really juicy because you're really confronted with what's important. Do you know what I mean? Like a priest friend of mine said to me, he says, I've never ever seen a person when they're dying say, I wish I'd spent more time in the office or I'd worked harder. They normally express, he said, regret. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's good.
You want to say anything? Want to say anything?
Okay. Was everybody here?
No. Well, I think we have Aria here.
Oh, hi, Aria.
Hi.
I joined a little late, but I've been here for most of it.
Okay.
So yeah, I didn't hear the whole entire talk, but something I don't know if I've heard spoken before is like the concept of like things happening vertically or horizontally. And maybe I don't fully understand it, but I really enjoy and appreciate like relations made like that, because I think it helps me to better understand like how my actions are happening and how like my emotions are coming up. And so I'm like mulling that concept in my head. To me, it means like moving horizontally is when I'm not feeling good. I'm feeling really stressed and I don't want to feel stressed. And so I'm just moving horizontally. I'm trying to change how I feel to feel a different way and to feel better. Cause it's like, oh, I want to feel good. I don't want to feel stressed or sad or whatever. Whereas the vertical movement is more of like allowing God to like shine light on that, and then it to be okay, because even in the situations that I don't like, God is still there. So that's like the vertical movement. Is that
pretty good?
Yeah, but we don't dissociate it.
Helpful for me to utilize.
When the vertical is there, you're living the horizontal from the vertical. Okay. So you're living the horizontal, but it's from the vertical. When you're lost in material existence, you're living the horizontal from the horizontal.
Okay. Right. So it's kind of like you're living in the vertical, what's given is given, and then you continue to move through life horizontally, but it's given from like the vertical, as opposed to just like, oh, I'm living life, this is like the basis of everything, and then that, I don't know, I think that's a little
perfectly said. You know how Amy said that her whole body was relaxed? That's the horizontal. So it's the manifestation of the vertical in the horizontal. So it forms a cross, doesn't it? This is the Gnostic understanding of the cross. But I don't mind stealing from anywhere. But what you're saying is right. So that when you conduct your life, when your mind is clear and your heart is non-disturbed, you still are living your life, doing your duties and everything else, but you're living the life of God in the world as yourself, aren't you? It's got to be in the world. It has to find expression. That we want. Without expression, we got nothing. We got this, goodness and wisdom. It's only when that's embodied as a way of living in the world do we find completion. Okay.
Yeah, I like that. I like that way of thinking about it. It's helpful.
Yeah, have a listen to the talk again and it'll be fine. That's good. That's good. Nice to see you again.
Yeah.
Aria? Okay. Darling.
Well, it's interesting that we're talking about the horizontal and the vertical, because I wrote on a piece of paper, it's only when we are in the vertical that we are one with God. Otherwise, we are in the horizontal.
Yes.
But it's this cross.
Yep.
The cross.
Yep.
It's a continuous cross.
Yes. Yeah.
So I am with God going through life.
Yes.
And going through whatever it is, but I'm with God.
Yes.
And so I turn my back to God, and then I turn then I turn back towards God. It's
but it's not a denial.
You could say you could say it's an ascending and a descending.
Yes. Yes.
At only one moment in time.
Yes.
But I liked what Amy said.
Yeah.
That was good.
Yeah, so it's not a dissociation of the spiritual world versus the physical world. That's crazy stuff.
Absolutely not. They're two together.
Yeah. Very good.
Cool.
Kevin. And by the way, Stephen, sorry I just interrupted you. I'm a bit of a loudmouth, and I can compulsively interrupt. So thank you very much for your patience and kindness. Okay. Don't hate me.
No, the sinner's not going to hate God.
I've got psychological problems. Be kind. Okay. All right. Okay. Kevin.
I find it helpful, this sort of framework of seeing that from the vertical, at any moment, the presence of God, or the life that is God, can be obtained in my life in finite forms, in the form of showing me what would be right, what would be wrong in terms of conduct, what would be what's true or false in terms of my thinking, and even when I'm in rumination, agitated because someone has done something I don't like, or a situation I don't like, suddenly this light of awareness can come in and show me I'm off with the pixies, and I'm immediately embraced, or can be lifted out of that horizontal life of struggles. And then my very life and being is God's life in finite form as it obtains in human consciousness. And I can abide and participate in that, and it's only then that I'm loving God. Otherwise, I'm having thoughts about me myself and that's not the same. And the human condition seems to be one of, I should speak for myself. Like, I could easily say I'm mostly off with the pixies, but I like the idea that that's just me giving a reality to the falsity of my life. At any moment, I can find the presence of God obtaining in me, whether in form of showing me in relation to conduct, in terms of cognition, or in terms of my very life and being, that and I change, and I can live that understanding. The more I live it, the more I can see the good of it, and also see the stupidity of the other.
the change is the living the good of it. So when you're living the life that God is, the very act of living the life that God is giving you, which we just did a minute ago, that lifts you out of your life. So we don't even try to get rid of the other. We turn.
Oh, you don't need to.
And we just have to live the right, live the truth, and live the good that is the life of God. That's it.
Yes,
and that's what truly is religion. That is the core, that is the sap of the tree. Different forms, aren't there, of religion? But the juice, and Dayananda was very good at explaining the juice. Do you know what I mean? He unfolded the juice like I've never seen anyone. It's remarkable, really. It unconfuses everybody. Very good, Kevin. Smita.
When I was being with myself,
Can you speak up a bit, Smita, please?
Yeah. When I was being with myself, I was filled with awareness of God, and I didn't want anything to be different. I felt a state of calm and peace, and I did occasionally get thoughts, but it kind of deviated from that presence. But again, I got my mind back to the present. So that was very effective, and it helped me.
Yes, when you come back and abide in the very life, and you see, one of the great things about Dayananda, if you look at the whole universe as an ocean of presence, the ocean of presence, doesn't matter what it is, even war, there's an ocean of presence that's here. Dayananda says that we don't have to go into a boat to go into middle ocean, touch water. We can touch water anywhere. So the thing is that there's an ocean of presence. When we are actually abiding in that ocean of presence and appreciating it, then we're living the vision, which is there is only God. Everything is God. So you can take that two ways. It can be either a vision to be lived, or you can take it as theology. Theology won't help because it's abstracted. But when you're living the very wisdom as your life, that's this whole non-dual knowledge business, isn't it? Which Vedanta clarifies more as a teaching, clarifies more. A non-duality thing is no one. That's it's a very strong teaching. The Vedanta teaching, the Hindu teaching about that. All right. Well, it's been lovely talking to you guys again.
Yes.
Thank you, Pete. Thank
Same.
Hey.
All right. And so we'll see you again, and look after yourself. Lovely to see you, Aria, and you too, Trish, and whatever, and Bob, and
And Smita,
Amy,
lovely to see you again.
Why do I think you're Amanda? Who's Amanda?
I don't know.
It's a sort of like a senior moment or something. I don't know.
She's joining next week.
So
you have a premonition of a new member.
Okay, Amy. I'll try and put it in my memory. Amy.
It's okay.
Okay. All right. Well, God bless all of you, and we'll see you next month. Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Yes,
Ciao.
absolutely.
Bye.